Hey everyone, welcome to our last episode of the night. We preview the big college football matchups we have of the weekend. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
All right, Joe, let's start off on the West Coast. I know this is not a place where the most biased show on internet radio tends to go to, but there's a huge game going on for the Pac 12 and for the last chances that the Pac 12 has to make the college football playoff. And Joe, to me, this game is such a toss up. And in fact, it fits perfectly that I'm calling this game Duck Duck Utes because I have no idea who to choose to win this game. Of course, Oregon this year has been the cream of the crop in the Pac 12. It looked like maybe it was going to be UCLA earlier, but that turned out to not work out. And Utah came in the season with a lot of expectation, but had a couple bad losses to begin the year. And then the last month and a half, they've been looking more like what you usually see out of Kyle Whittingham's tough group. And suddenly Utah is looking like the team that's going to be making the Pac-12 championship. And it looks like Oregon is going to have to beat them twice to make the college football playoffs. This weekend, Oregon is going to have to go to Utah. And Joe, what I would say is a very underrated road atmosphere. I think Utah has probably outside of Oregon the best student section and road environment of any Pac-12 school right now. And this is a tough game, Joe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's almost like you're playing a game of Duck Duck Goose right now because it's tough for me to choose a winner in this one.
No, that's exactly right. And I remember Bryce Young, growing up in California, he said that he wanted to come to the SEC to play in louder stadiums because a lot of the Pac-12 schools, out in California, out west, are not as loud. But you're right. One that is definitely Utah. It definitely carries the torch in that regard as well, in addition to Oregon. Yeah, I think that, Oregon's clearly the better team. They have the track record, of winning at Ohio State this year, which is such an immensely impressive win, the more you think about it with each passing week. I've been impressed with their ability to overcome the loss of C.J. Verdell with the injuries he's dealt with. Having Travis Dye play really well as an explosive back has been important. Anthony Brown has been steady at times. I want to say I saw a statistic, though, where neither one of these teams really has much of a wide receiver threat. I think I saw where not one player on either team, wide receiver-wise, has more than 400 receiving yards. So like a really, minimal output there. And so I kind of expect the fact that Oregon has a good running game. I think that that could allow them to kind of control the tempo of this game. And I think that kind of gives them the recipe to be able to win on the road in a raucous environment.
Yeah, Joe, I've got the slightest of leans of Oregon in this game, only because of what I saw them do in a tough environment in Ohio State without Kayvon Thibodeau. And they have Kayvon Thibodeau back right now. He's probably the number one overall draft pick this year. I've been impressed with the way they've run the ball with Dye since the loss of Verdell, which I really didn't think they could overcome. CJ Verdell is a next level talent. And, it scares me the limitations of the passing game and the inconsistencies of Anthony Brown. But I just think that top to bottom, they're better than this Utah team. And
I think so, too. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. You're good.
No, I think so, too. I mean, this is a good Utah team. This is not, the best version of Utah. This is not the team that had Zach Moss even a couple of years ago.
Right. This isn't the team that Oregon spoiled their chances to go to the college football playoff a couple of years ago. This is just a good Utah team. And I think this Oregon team, I'm not saying they're great, but I'll give them a very good label. And so I like Oregon to pull out a slight win in this. Now, based on what I see, I'm not sure that I might not take Utah to win in the rematch. We shall see.
Right. Exactly.
Because wouldn't that be a spoiler right there if Oregon beats Utah in the regular season and Utah gives the Ducks a little payback for 2 years ago when Oregon kept them out of the college football playoff?
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
Could be a story to watch. All right, Joe, speaking of teams that don't get a whole lot of respect, I mean, we're sitting here talking about Oregon potentially losing to a 3-loss Utah team a couple weeks from now. The UTSA Roadrunners, right now, they're one of, 3 teams that are still undefeated in college football. When you talk about Cincinnati, Georgia, and then UTSA. And yet, I don't even know if they're in the top 12 of the college football playoff rankings, Joe. In fact, I don't think they are. I've been very impressed with not only the way they've won on the field, but the way they've managed things off the field. They were able to keep their big, hot coach right now, Traylor, who everybody wants, in San Antonio, gave him the extension. He's a lifer right now. They have a chance to go undefeated this season. And I think to be that group of 5 team, if Cincinnati somehow does get in the college football playoff, which based on all we've talked about in the last 30 minutes, they'll find a way to keep them out, I'm sure. But assuming Cincinnati does make the college football playoff, then UTSA should be able to get in. They have a big game this weekend against UAB. Of course, UAB, every year we talk about their coach, how he should be getting a bigger job. And Joe, this leads me to Dan's lock of the week. UTSA, while they've been undefeated and very impressive in all their victories, are only 4.5-point favorites against UAB. I'm a big fan of what they've done with UAB. I think that it's been great the way they've come back, the way they've resurrected their program. I do think that their coach deserves a bigger job. I actually was when I heard that Auburn was talking with them last year, I wasn't upset about it. I didn't want him to be Auburn's coach, but I didn't think it would be the worst thing in the world if he got hired as Auburn's coach. That's a lot of respect for me. The UAB coach wouldn't have, caused a lot of ire from me. And I think that they've done a good job. But this is not the greatest UAB team. The last couple of years, they've had much better UAB teams than what you're seeing right now. The defense isn't quite what it's been. They haven't been able to run the ball with Spencer Brown like they were the last couple of years. And UAB's taken a couple steps back. And this UTSA team had kind of a little bit of a push last weekend from Southern Miss, surprisingly, with one of the most putrid Southern Miss teams we've ever seen. They actually put up a real effort against UTSA last week. And, Joe, I think that was a big wake-up call to the Roadrunners. I think they're going to run all over UAB. And I say lay the 4.5 with UTSA and stick with the momentum. And don't back UAB this year just because they've been good the last couple of times. I think this is an easy cover for UTSA this weekend.
Yeah, I think the reason for the line had a lot to do with the surprising performance against Southern Miss, where it was closer, than everybody expected. But yeah, I think that there's a good chance that UTSA will bounce back this year. I've been really impressed as well with what they've done the last couple of seasons. I think their previous coach, Frank Wilson, I heard he was actually on the radar for a few big jobs a couple of years ago. Then he moved on. But really the only thing prior to that I knew about this program was, of course, Marcus Davenport being drafted by the Saints in the first round. And so, now that they suddenly kind of have, other reasons to be recognized.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big market. It could be a program that's always growing. You always know that a Texas school, they're always going to have access to all kinds of recruits. San Antonio is supposed to be a very nice city. And so I'm happy to see they're keeping their coach too. And like I said, they're going to ride that wave of momentum, especially after a wake-up call against a bad Southern Miss team last week. And I think they get a big-time win right here. And they cover the 4.5. Joe, what is your line that you like this week?
I'm going close to home to the Ole Miss Vanderbilt game. I know that Ole Miss, obviously, the huge favorite to win this game against the Vanderbilt team that's winless in the SEC. But I just have a feeling that the line at 36.5, Ole Miss is favored. That seems like a little bit too high. And the reason I say that is, first and foremost, I think that Ole Miss, is still a little bit banged up. And second, because of that, I think that you could look to see Ole Miss take some starters out of the game in the second half. Maybe Matt Corral comes out at halftime or after the third quarter, unless they're just, chasing Heisman stats, which is a possibility. But I think at the end of the day, though, you're going to see some starters rested at some point, and I think that'll allow Vanderbilt to cover in this game.
Joe, I think that's a pretty good pick. And, I generally don't like to pick on Ole Miss games, just like I have a rule that I don't pick Ole Miss, Auburn, or Alabama games because it doesn't go that well for me in the pocketbook. But I would say if I were to go a line on this one, I would probably take Vandy as well, especially when you and I have talked about it. There's a weird history of Vanderbilt beating Ole Miss, especially in Oxford. They're not going to beat them this year, obviously, but I mean, you and I've seen it when Ole Miss was 17-point plus favorites over Vanderbilt, them coming into Oxford and beating us. And this Vanderbilt team, of course, is very proud. They've had some moments this year. I mean, they should have beaten South Carolina. That was just That was the most Vanderbilt way ever to lose that game. They're not awful. They're just bad. And I think that you're right. I think they're going to be looking forward to Mississippi State. They don't want to get people hurt. They'll probably be resting some starters. I think it's possible that the Vanderbilt gets a late touchdown to cover against the defense. They're probably going to rest some of their starters as well. So I think 36.5 is pretty rich. And I think you're right. I think Vandy probably covers that.
It's the largest line I've ever seen for an Ole Miss SEC opponent. Like it's almost like that you would think they were playing an FCS school.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Vandy has lost to an FCS school this year. So
Well, there you go.
All right, Joe, speaking of FCS schools, the way that Auburn played the second half of that game was worse than most FCS schools when they blew a 28-3 lead against Mississippi State. And of course, it got worse when they lost Bo Nix as the starting quarterback for the rest of the season to a fractured ankle. And when they lost Anders Carlson to a torn ACL. And so now they're out there starting quarterback and starting kicker. And TJ Finley comes in to be Auburn's starting quarterback on the road against South Carolina. You know, it's interesting, Joe. You know, the last time that TJ Finley started a game at quarterback, who he started against and where it was?
I'm guessing it had to be Columbia, South Carolina.
It was Columbia, South Carolina. He started LSU's game there, and that was the first start that he ever made as a Bengal Tiger. And he put up fantastic stats. I think they beat him like 56-7 or something the week before they played Auburn. And things didn't go very well in that LSU Auburn game. But TJ Finley is now getting returned to Columbia, the place where he made his first start. And he's gonna have the keys to the castle right now for this week and next week for Alabama. And, he's done some good things. Of course, he willed Auburn to win in a great performance against Georgia State. Didn't look that sharp when he came in last week against Mississippi State when Bo got hurt. And he didn't do that great. This one opportunity that he had against LSU, but those were different situations, Joe. He had a very short leash against LSU. And, of course, we know what Bo did when he got back in that second time in the game against LSU, had a virtuoso performance. And then, of course, last week, that was a rough situation to put TJ in after Bo was hurt, came back in, came out, and then you're down by 9. I think that's a tough thing to grade him against. And so I'm very fascinated to see the way he plays, but I think he's going to do a good job this weekend. I really do.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how he fares. He's just a freakish athlete, with his size and everything, physicality. So really intrigued to see, how he plays because we thought, coming into the LSU game, there was a possibility he could start that game. And so now this will be interesting. And then also, in addition to how he plays against South Carolina, it's an audition for him, for whether it's going to be Auburn next year or if he transfers for another school, he wants to play well.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that he should play well. I mean, to give him another chance against Bo next year, which, I hate to say it, but I don't think he's gonna have any chance to beat out Bo next season, especially the way that Bo kind of finished the season. And really what he did for most of the game against Mississippi State before his defense collapsed. Bo threw for 377 yards in that game. He was having a great football game before he got injured on a 30-yard pass that he completed. So I mean, it's tough to have any kind of fault in Bo Nix and what happened in that game, especially when he comes back out after getting hurt and scores another touchdown. So I think that this is probably more likely an audition for TJ for the next place he transfers. But of course, I'd love to keep him at Auburn, and I want him to do a good job. And maybe if he plays really well, then we know that we have a very serviceable backup, and maybe he'll stick around. But point is, I think he's going to have a lot of impetus to play well this weekend, and I think he is. And I think he's going to have a very mad team on both sides of the ball, especially the defensive side of the ball to help him out. I think that Smoke Monday and Roger McCreary and Derek Hall and company are going to wreak havoc on the Gamecocks after what happened this weekend, because I'm sure they have been getting lit up by Derek Mason this week after giving up 40-plus points.
I think so. And playing a team like South Carolina is a good opponent to play after that because it's a very winnable game.
Yeah.
It's not like as easy as playing an FCS opponent, but still, more winnable than playing like a top-tier SEC team.
That's right. So, Joe, I don't think Auburn's going to look like super sharp offensively, but South Carolina's defense isn't great, and I think that it's probably possible that maybe Auburn gets a defensive touchdown. I'm going to take Auburn to win this game 31-20.
Okay. And, I mean, I like Auburn as well. I'll say probably a similar score. I'll say like 34-17. But the last thing I was going to say of note, I can't remember the last time that Auburn played an SEC team the week before the Iron Bowl.
It's been a while, Joe. I think the last time they did it was actually the 2013 season with the prayer of Jordan Hare and the kick six. I think they played Georgia the week before they played Alabama that time.
Okay. Wow.
And interestingly, Joe, speaking of the kick six season, the last time that Auburn had a field goal kicker play a game that did not have the last name Carlson was the national championship game against Florida State back on January 1st or January 10th of 2014 when they had the double doink kicker for the Bears. His name's escaping me right now. He was actually the Saints kicker for a little bit this year too.
Oh, Cody Parkey.
Yeah, Cody Parkey is the last. When Cody Parkey started against Florida State in that national championship game, ironically, he missed a field goal that ended up being a big deal in that game. Not that I remember. That was the last time that a kicker started for Auburn in a football game who didn't have the last name Carlson. So they've really had a lockdown on that job the last 8 years.
That's crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. So this season, I believe it's going to be Oscar Chapman is going to get the field goal kicking duties and the punting duties for Auburn this weekend and be the first non-Carlson to start since the 2014 national championship game.
I thought maybe you were about to throw me out a cliffhanger that there was a third one coming up.
I don't think there's another Carlson. I wish there was, but I think we eventually ran out of that well. Joe, talking about going back to the Ole Miss Vandy game for just a second, I'm going to get to go to that game. It's going to be my first Ole Miss game that I've been to in person in a very long time. And in fact, probably since I was in law school there, I went to an Ole Miss baseball game, baseball series last year, which was actually against South Carolina, talking about them. But I haven't been to a football game since we were in law school there. So I'm pretty excited about it. I know it's Vanderbilt. In hindsight, I kind of wish we would have gone to the A&M game last weekend, but this should be a fun one. And as Lane Kiffin reminded everybody on Twitter, this is Matt Corral's last home game. So that's kind of exciting.
No, it is. And ironically, the last Ole Miss game I saw in person 4 years ago was also against Vandy. And so that's interesting. But yeah, I think that, the fact that you have Corral and some of those players that, won't necessarily be their senior night is their de facto, last night
their swan
in Oxford. Yeah. So I think that, that'll make, people want to come out and watch. Like more people will show up than normally would against a Vanderbilt team because of that reason.
That's right, Joe. Speaking of a game that I probably wouldn't have been super excited about before the season, but now I have a lot of interest in, is Ohio State and Michigan State. Right now, Michigan State, yes, they lost that game to the Spoilermakers, but they still have everything allegedly on the table before them, right? I mean, supposedly they can win the rest of their games and get in the college football playoff unless Gary Barta and his cronies find another way to keep Sparty down. But assuming that all things are fair right now in the college football playoff, I can't even finish that sentence. Assuming all things are fair in the college football playoff committee room, Michigan State has a great opportunity to make some headway this weekend and beat an Ohio State team that literally just keeps getting better and better and is starting to look like a team that, dare I say, can compete with Georgia. I don't know, but they seem to be a team that at least has an offense that can maybe, run out on the same field as Georgia. Joe, Ohio State's coming off, of course, a big win over that same Purdue team that beat Michigan State. I believe this game is going to be in Columbus. What's your feel on this one, Jeff?
Well, my initial thought is it's kind of a Heisman separator type game because you have Stroud and you have Walker for both teams. They're going to be able to kind of have a Heisman moment if they want to. And I think that come Sunday afternoon or Saturday night, a lot of experts are going to be talking about the winner of this game if they have a good performance, whether that's Walker or Stroud as one of the Heisman favorites. I think that the game being at Columbus, though, is a big factor. I know the very next week, Ohio State will finish their season at Michigan. I think having, that crowd, I know they lost to Oregon earlier in the season, but I still think, for the most part, 9 times out of 10, that's going to make an impact in the favor of Ohio State. I think that if Michigan State's going to win the game, they're going to have to, obviously run the ball effectively with Walker and take away possession time from Ohio State. But at the end of the day, I just see too much firepower with this Ohio State offense right now, and I think that they'll just kind of pull away in the second half.
Joe, the thing that really scares me is although Mel Tucker's done an excellent job coaching this Michigan State team, the strength of this team is not their defense. And in particular, it's really not their secondary. In fact, they have a poor secondary. It's like a bottom half of college football secondary, which is why they got beat up by Purdue. Aiden O'Connell and David Bell could do whatever they wanted to against this Michigan State defense. Okay, that's one thing, Aiden O'Connell and David Bell. Completely different when you're talking about C.J. Stroud, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. I mean, Ohio State probably has the best receivers in America this year, and they are going to be licking their chops to go against the Sparty defense. And, I'm sorry, that matchup in and of itself tells me what's going to happen in this game. And I think Kenneth Walker is a fantastic running back, and he's going to get his against Ohio State. C.J. Verdell from Oregon, who we mentioned earlier, when he got injured in that game, I think he already had 150 yards in the third quarter when he got injured. Kenneth Walker's a better back than C.J. Verdell is. And so I think Kenneth Walker is going to do everything he can do to submit his chances to win the Heisman. I just don't think he has the talent around him to win this game. And I'm also a little concerned in their ability to throw the ball. I think Peyton Thorne is a limited quarterback. When I watched him against Michigan, he's very average. He misses a lot of throws he should make. And as good as they're going to be able to run the ball, eventually Ohio State's going to start crowding the box and shut that down. I don't think they have a good enough passing attack to be able to exploit that.
That's kind of the way I see it too. And I would also add that I think the first half could be pretty close, kind of back and forth. But then I kind of see Ohio State just kind of asserting their will in the second half. And I think they'll kind of win it going away. I'm going to go Ohio State 42-24 for Michigan State.
Okay, I'm going to go Ohio State 38, Michigan State 21. So we got pretty similar spreads right there. I think we both think Ohio State's 17 to 20 points better than Michigan State is.
I think so.
All right, Joe, speaking of a game that you would probably think that we would say one team that's 17 to 20 points better on, here's one that I think is a little bit of a trap game. I think we're going to end our analysis with this one. Alabama is going on the road to take on Arkansas. Yes, sir. And I think it's kind of an interesting game right now. Alabama, of course, they got really heavily scared by LSU. LSU probably should have won that game. Arkansas last week is coming off a big win over that same LSU team where we got a big yes, sir, from Coach Pittman at the end of that game. And I think that Arkansas, they were so hot to begin the season, then they ran the buzzsaw of just all these good teams in a row, Georgia, Auburn, Ole Miss, all these teams, they played them back to back to back, dropped 3 games in a row. Then they beat Mississippi State in a tight game, which Mississippi State's, turned out to be a pretty good football team. And then they go and beat LSU. And Arkansas's quietly won 2 pretty good games back to back. And Joe, I think this is a little bit of a scary game for Alabama. Obviously they got the Iron Bowl next week, which isn't as big a deal as it was before with Auburn blowing that historic lead to Mississippi State and losing Bo Nix for the season. But I think that makes Alabama a little bit even more lackadaisical in this game. I mean, they're pretty much a shoo-in to be in the SEC championship right now. I think this is going to be a great road environment. Arkansas is they're going to be heavily motivated to win this game. Pittman, he got that win against Texas, but that certainly doesn't look like, the win it was before. I think, he wants this win to really cement what has been a great season for Arkansas and for people to really look at it as what it is. And I think this is a scary, scary game for Alabama this weekend.
Well, I'm hoping that it is, us, being the biased, fans here rooting for Ole Miss, the perfect scenario for Ole Miss is to beat Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and have Alabama lose to Arkansas and Auburn. Then that would send Ole Miss to Atlanta in the SEC championship game. So in order for, that dream to become a reality, we need Alabama to lose to Arkansas. I think one of the pathways for it is for obviously Arkansas to avoid turnovers. We see it time and time again. To beat Alabama, you got to be aggressive. You got to take chances. You got to capitalize on those chances. And then you got to avoid turnovers and win that turnover battle. And we've seen KJ Jefferson this year really be good at protecting the football for the most part. He's only thrown 3 interceptions this season. And so we got to see that number, I think, stay at 3 coming into this time next week in order for Arkansas to win this game. That's one of the things I'll be looking at.
That's right, Joe. And, one thing they have, the advantage they have is Alabama has not been a very good rush defense this year. And we saw LSU and Florida, two very average teams, light up the ground against Alabama. And Arkansas is a good running team. And not only that, KJ Jefferson's a very good mobile quarterback who gets a lot of yards on his own. He's a little bit like Cam Newton-like in his body and the way he runs. But, also they're going to be able to run the ball, and maybe Traylon Burks has a chance to have a really good game. He is a first-round draft pick level receiver, excellent. And Alabama's secondary is not quite what it's been in the past. So there's going to be some opportunities for Burks to get open. And if KJ can hit him, I think Burks could have a big game.
I think so. I think that, at the end of the day, Alabama will still win. But, I'm hopeful that Arkansas can make this kind of a competitive game, maybe like stay within like 10 or 15 points. I'm kind of feeling a score like Alabama wins like 27-17 is kind of my feeling right now.
Joe, I'm taking Bama on this one, 31-23. I think Arkansas stays within a touchdown. They have to settle for a couple field goals, and that's kind of the difference in the game.
Okay, I can see that.
And Joe, just briefly before we go, let's give you a chance. I know you wanted to mention that Cincinnati SMU game. Cincinnati, of course, this is probably their last, I guess, quality win they can have the rest of the season. Although I'm sure the committee will find a way to trash SMU and say they're not a very good team, so it doesn't matter. But this is an interesting game. SMU, of course, was hot for a long time. Sonny Dykes is rumored to be the TCU coach. Everybody wants him in Texas. And they were undefeated. And, of course, they lost to Houston on a kickoff return, and then their season went, their undefeated dreams went away. Still a good football team in SMU, and this should be an interesting game in the AC.
Yeah, I think so. Is it on Friday or Saturday? I was trying to remember what day it's going to be played.
I think it's a Friday night game.
Okay, so here's the thing I want to say about that. I've actually seen a precedent for games that are played like on a Friday close to Thanksgiving or around this time of the year that always seems to be an issue for teams that are kind of like having a very historic kind of surprising season. And I'll give you 2 examples. I remember that we were talking about earlier before the show, that Oklahoma State team back in 2011, that one loss they had was to Iowa State on a Friday night. Mm-hmm. Then you throw in the scenario that Derek Carr, when he was at Fresno State, they were like 11-0, and they lose a Friday game to San Jose State in a similar fashion. And so just based on those examples right there, I just have a feeling, like I'm not saying Cincinnati's going to lose, but I just have an eerie feeling that against a ranked SMU team in this setting with all the pressure, it's going to cause them more trouble than it should.
Joe, I think it's going to be a tight game too. And I actually think I would have been comfortable giving SMU the outright win if Cincinnati hadn't been pushed the way they had the last couple of weeks, especially against Tulsa. And I think Cincinnati, because they've been pushed, are a little bit more battle hardened. I think they're going to win a tight game. I like Cincinnati in this one, 41-35.
Yeah, I mean, I like Cincinnati as well. I think Ritter, in the running game, that makes the big difference. And so, yeah, I think that Cincinnati wins. I'll go 41-34.
Okay. Well, good deal. Well, we'll come back, see each other after the Thanksgiving holiday. Really enjoyed talking about football this year. And when we talk next time, we'll be talking about the SEC championship game. I want to thank everybody for listening. You can catch all more episodes on Spotify. Just look up the Dan and Joe Sports Show on Spotify. And, of course, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Dan and Joe Sports Show YouTube channel, and then like us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.